Oh, usually do. I orientate, yeah.
I know I taught at Harrison. I know I walked through Harrison. I know my grandmother. I know I lived on the south side with my grandmother. I know Harrison still sits down there with 300 tires in it, rocking to the ground in the city council.
Excuse me, I'm going to call this meeting to order. My name is Dan Walther, and the purpose of this meeting is to get feedback and input from the community in regards to the renaming of Thomas Jefferson Elementary School. Kind of the rules of order. Thank you. We've asked people if they wanted to speak to please fill out a card, just as we do during the regular board meeting. Each person will be given up to 5 minutes if you need that much time. I have also had other people who requested that they can make a statement through an email, and so they have emailed me at my school board address, and in between people I may go ahead and read some of those so that everybody gets their input into this. What we're trying to do is gather input. I think one of the things that I would like to do, and if some of you have any question, my good secretary has made copies of these and stuff, and I have the actual board action item that triggered this whole thing, and this was September 21st, 2020, and the subject was renaming of school buildings. The proposed action that the Board of Education approve the renaming of the following schools: Harrison Community Learning Center, Charles Lindbergh Middle School, Roosevelt Magnet School, Thomas Jefferson Primary School, Washington Gifted School, and Calvin Coolidge Middle School. The background information, it's pursuant to board policy number 4152 entitled Operational Service, Name of Buildings and Facilities, and the Honoring of Individual. It is the prerogative of the Board of Education to name all school buildings and facilities and to authorize plaques honoring individuals. As a Peoria resident and an African American school board member, I am proposing the renaming of the above referenced schools, which are named after historical American figures with ties to slavery and racism. This action item authorizes the renaming process. If approved by the Board of Education, the proposed renaming will be referred to the Building Committee of the Board of Education for deliberation, including consideration of the names historically relevant Peorians to replace them. The Building Committee will in turn make a formal recommendation to the full board for final approval. That was submitted by Gregory Wilson, who was Vice President of the Board of Education. Since that time, the only alteration to this was that the board decided that we had 6 names. I am, fortunately or unfortunately, a co-chair of the Building Committee. So this thing got pushed down to our table as a committee chair. And what Ms. Kostick, who is my co-chair, and I agreed upon was that when we've only had one name change, and that took us almost a year to go through that process. And I have a distinguished former board member who was part of that process when we went through that, and we did this where we had town hall meetings. We just tried to get feedback from the community and from the schools as to where they were at on the renaming and what the position was. What Ms. Kostick and I agreed to, quite frankly, was that we didn't think we could do 6 schools in 1 year. We didn't think it was fair to those schools. We didn't think it was fair to the community. So we had, a couple months ago, basically a vote to do the priority of which schools would go first. Thomas Jefferson was voted as the first school to be discussed, which gets us to where we're at tonight. We're going to go and try to get input from folks. And if you could, you put your name in here, but when you speak, we'd like to find out if you were for the change, if you're against the change, if you have a recommendation for a change in the name, we'd like to get that too. We're trying to keep an accurate record. Fortunately, my high-tech person is here, so we'll have this recorded when you've done this. Like I said, we're going to go basically with the people that are here first, and then I will read. We've gotten some emails. I opened my school board email open if people had comments and wanted to send that. Some people couldn't get here tonight. Others are not as brave as you are to stand in front of the microphone and speak. I know that's a thing Mr. Knapp has overcome that fear, and so think there'll be some other people here. If you've come in and would like to speak, and you haven't yet, over by the door there's a card. If you wanted to speak, you just need to fill that out and turn it in to the board secretary right up here. We're trying to get anybody who wants to speak the opportunity to do that. So with that, I am going to call the first person, Spanky Edwards.
Good afternoon. My name is Spanky Edwards, 1209 East Fry Avenue, Peoria, Illinois. I am a Peoria High graduate, 2007, and I'm here to stand in opposition, I stand for the change of Thomas Jefferson to the Reverend Dr. Cordy Tidwell Vivian. Upon graduating from Peoria High and ICC, I matriculated and transferred to Morehouse College. There I had the opportunity to work with Dr. Vivian, and he adopted me as one of his grandsons. It was then when I had an opportunity to work hand to hand with Dr. Vivian and ask him a bunch of questions and about his time in Peoria. He told me that he taught Richard Pryor at Carver Center. He was when Dr. Vivian was in Peoria, his first job was at Carver. He was also responsible for desegregating Barton's cafeteria in the 1940s while Dr. King was still in high school. So when he moved to Atlanta to work with Dr. King, he said it was like a kindred spirit of them. So I stand in support of changing Thomas Jefferson to Dr. C.T. Vivian, because if you do a side-by-side comparison to their legacies, it's not even close. We have a president who's responsible for the Declaration of Independence and claiming that all men are created equal while he owned a slave. That is the height of hypocrisy. He does not deserve, in the 2020, in the 21st century, he does not fit the bill of the honor of having a school named after him. Not only was he a slave owner who owned hundreds of slaves, he impregnated and he had a serial relationship with a slave, and he raped continuously, had 6 children, which he also enslaved. Not in 2021 should we have a man of that magnitude of a deplorable behavior to have a school named after him. So compared to what he has done, compared to Dr. Vivian, it's not even close. Dr. Vivian has created he created the Upper Bound program. He was responsible for making America more of a democracy. And when Thomas Jefferson was president, only 6% of the population was able to vote. If you were black, you could not vote. If you were female, you could not vote. And if you were a poor white person, you could not vote. So, and this is all during his reign. He did absolutely nothing to make America a real democracy. Dr. Vivian and the work that C.T. Vivian did and in the civil rights movement made America more of a democracy. It was not a republic, and it was not a democracy then. So if you compare their resumes and what they have actually contributed to America and its legacy, it's not even close. And in 2021, and with what is going on around the entire world and it was happening in America, C.T. Vivian is a 10 times better, 100 times better candidate to have an honor of a school named after him after a deplorable president who owned slaves and raped slaves. It's not even a fair comparison, and you can have this conversation offline with anyone else that thinks that he does. It's not even fair. Change the name Thomas Jefferson to the Reverend Dr. C.T. Vivian. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The next person to speak, Mr. Mike Murphy. Effective July 1st, a new school board member.
All right. Good evening, Mr. Walther, Mrs. Kostick. Thank you for having us in here today to give our opinions on the renaming of the schools. I'm here Not to say whether or not I'm in support of the name changes or not, because that decision had been already decided, but I'm here for a suggestion of the name changes. So tonight I'm here as a parent from Keller Primary School, and after speaking with several other families, not just at Keller, but across the district, a lot of people are on both sides of this fence, whether or not we should be renaming it, whether or not we are canceling culture. You can't erase history, you can't, et cetera. My suggestion is, because of the amount of money and time that went into renaming Dr. Maud Sanders School, is that if we are going to be renaming the schools, that we rename them not after people, but after simply a proposal. One option would be maybe naming them after a number system. Subsequently, other districts that have as many buildings as we do oftentimes go in that direction. But if keeping names are what's important, and we're looking at it as far as certain schools already are not named after people, Charter Oak, Glen Oak, then maybe possibly renaming them simply after more trees, more maybe the street names that they're named after. And so that had been a pretty widely supported idea from the parents that I spoke to and family members and faculty, that if we are in fact going to be renaming these schools, that we simply do it and stop naming them after people, because unfortunately I feel like you'll always find someone who will be or can find something offensive about somebody else. And I'm not saying that there's anything offensive that I know of about that person, but I'm just saying that instead of looking at changing this down the road, that we just simply change them once now and be done with it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. The next speaker would be Mr. Terry Knapp.
And I will echo what you're saying. We have divisions. I love Ernestine Jackson. Ernestine Jackson, when she was on the board, did a lot of great things for this district to save this district from disaster that we were headed down. We're still headed in that direction. My point is, name it in the number system. That's the only way that she and I are going to agree. Because I don't agree with her, she doesn't agree with me, and I appreciate your points. But we get away from this controversy of school names. They've done this in other communities. This is not a first thing. And it's important that, I talked to a gentleman today. He happened to teach at Roosevelt, and we had an hour conversation. He taught at Roosevelt. I taught at Harrison. My kids went to Thomas Jefferson. They went to Washington Gifted. And my point is this. I never, when I served on the boards at those schools, when I taught at those schools, never heard one student or one parent, and I was at Harrison School for 3 years, and Harrison School had 700 students, over 700 students, and basically by the way we label people today, 98% or 99% were of color. Well, they were mixed. It's like our president. Did we have a black president? No, we did not. We had a mixed president. He had a white mother and he had a black father. Let's get over it. Let's not just lump people into black and white. I taught, if you took genetics in college, you have an element. I have an element, correct? So we're both black.
The one drop rule, according to the American Constitution, is one drop makes you black.
And they can get by that by the Democrats and Republicans getting together and changing that. Let me finish. Going back to the school situations, Harrison School was 98% black. I walked through the Harrison homes every day that it was clement enough for me to do that. Not one parent complained. Not one kid complained about the name Harrison School. When I was on the board for 4 years at Thomas Jefferson, not one parent, not one kid complained. Now we have a small number. Hey, my mother was married at 16. Let's put history into perspective. All kinds of people were married at 16. We have people walk into hospitals today, 15, 16, 14, 13, 12-year-old girls that have babies. You don't hear of anybody getting put in jail today in Peoria for that action. There should be investigations of every one of those births. We led the nation at one point in Peoria in teenage births. And many of those were incestual relationships. If we want to get into it, let's get into it. But this is not going to heal what we need to heal. We need to get on with education. We're in a deplorable situation. We have 6 schools in our name. People want to cancel culture, to use the term, the names of these presidents that did what, hey, whatever. You can do whatever. Let's get past it. Let's do the number system. Let's really do something for the community so the kids can get on with their education. I mean, has the school system benefited from the name change to Maude Sanders? I mean, have the kids learned more because we changed the name to Maude Sanders? No, they haven't. They don't even know what's going on. They're being force-fed to observe this bickering that's going on. So for the last 8 months, this has been going on. We asked people to come on the radio and explain this. They would not do it. The board president would not do it. There's been no discussion until this event, Mr. Walther, and thank you, that we could have a town meeting, and it was announced a day and a half before the town meeting. A day and a half. Is that the way we do business in Peoria? Are you kidding me? The people, I learned about it at 9 o'clock on Monday night about this meeting. That's not the way you do business, unless you're trying to push it through, cover it up, whatever. But to do this to our system and in front of our kids, they think we're a bunch of children.
Thank you, Mr. Knapp. Just 2 points. Ms. Costick and I are the co-chairs of this, and I would agree that there wasn't enough time in advertising for this meeting, and so for that, I think the Building and Grounds Committee should take some responsibility. We did try to push this out earlier so that it would
I applaud you all for
be
the
there.
effort.
And the other point I wanted to make in regards to a comment made by Mr. Murphy and made by Mr. Knapp, as far as going to a numbering system, I have had a number of emails that have made that same reference. And just for a footnote, the largest school district in the country is New York City, and their schools are named PS1 to PS 900 or whatever. They're numerically named. I'm just pointing that out. That's not unprecedented to do that. The next person to speak, former school board member Ernestine Jackson.
Good evening. As I look around this room today, I think I'm the only one that has some historical history regarding schools coming out of Mississippi in the very early 40s. So I know what it's like. I know what's going on. And this is not about just renaming schools. We have not taught history like it should have been taught in the first place. And that is to explain to our children the kinds of things that their forefathers went through with a lot of people that these schools are named after. Thomas Jefferson was a president that had over 600 slaves. He was in a lot of debt. So while other masters were freeing some of their slaves, he could not do it because he wanted to hang on to his property and his money. Sally Hemings was 15 years old when she had her first child by Thomas Jefferson, the President of the United States. She had 6 children. There are still lots of relatives on both sides. Some of them get along, some of them don't. But if you flip that thing today and make Thomas Jefferson black and Sally Hemings white, his name wouldn't have been on that school in the first place. It would not have been on that school. He wrote the Declaration. Yeah, he wrote a lot. He stated that all men are created equal, and yet he enslaved 600 people. He profited from slavery and the institution of slavery. In one of his essays, he wrote that African Americans were inferior to whites, and he went to his grave saying that African Americans are inferior to whites. I'm not inferior to anybody in this room that don't look like me. I think I'm just as bright as everybody else. And we need to teach our children, because if we keep telling our children they are inferior to somebody else, guess what's going to happen? So this isn't about just changing a name. It's looking at a person that bought and enslaved African Americans. Thomas Jefferson, along with so many other presidents and people of that time, were people that mistreated their slaves, mistreated them to the point that when they ran away, they were punished severely for trying to go to freedom. He could have freed his slaves and chose not to. For money. For money. I keep coming back to what I've been reading. I make sure when I get up here, I've done some research, that I've looked into everything I could possibly find to make my decision on anything. How can we honor someone that mistreated a certain group of people? How can we hold him in high esteem and tell our children we're going to be teaching African American history, Black history, from the beginning? You know what our kids are going to find? They're going to find some things they've never heard before. I keep hearing people say, well, that happened a long time ago. But our kids didn't know it because we chose not to teach real history. We didn't tell them that all those slaves were coming here were kings and queens. We didn't tell them that they invented mathematics and astrology. We didn't tell them that. Hopefully, with the new curriculum, our children would see that they are not inferior. Because you got to teach them about Thomas Jefferson. And I know Terry said people got married at 16. I'm sure they did. Because, believe me, I was born in the very early 40s. 1940, in fact. So I know when I was down south that people married early. But this wasn't the case of somebody marrying early. This was the case of the President of the United States having sex, and I'm going to say it, with a 15-year-old. If that happened today, what would happen to it? Well, it happened. So all I'm saying right now is I'm in favor of changing it. I'm in favor of teaching history as it is, so our children will understand why we are changing. We want that name changed.
Before we get to the next speaker, we have two people who have joined us on stage. And this is Ms. Lynn Kostick. She is co-chair of the Building and Grounds Committee. And this is President Doug Shaw, who came in and thought that there had been a coup while he was gone because I'm sitting in his chair and took his name and stuff with it. But it's only for this evening, trust me, President Shaw. So the next speaker up would be Lee Powers.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I taught school for 34 years. I
taught at Roosevelt for 16 of those years and coached basketball, and most of my students were 80% probably black. Most of my athletes were black. I'm not black, at least majority of me, maybe like all of us were mixed, So I can't speak from a black perspective. It's sort of like, people who lose a child, and first thing somebody says is, I know how you feel, or they want to empathize. You don't know how you feel unless you lost a child. You don't know how you feel unless you're black, So I understand that, and apologize if I say anything that would offend Ms. Jackson or this young gentleman here, who I was very impressed with, his research and so on. The perspective I'm coming from is this, and maybe it's the perspective of all the schools, but I know it is the one I taught at, Roosevelt. The kids were super proud of the school. It was a thing that they went and told their friends. I play for Roosevelt. I go to Roosevelt. They came to the games. They took great pride in it. And my recipe for curing poverty, for curing the problems that we face in our society, are pride in your schools. And it starts usually with the kids and the parents, and then, from there, because those people have to feel a sense of pride. And I know that there's nobody here trying to do an evil thing. There's nobody here trying to, do something that would offend or hurt somebody. But I can almost guarantee you that the kids that attended Roosevelt, and I talked to one on the phone, and he's on his way here, he's a black athlete, and I said, Robert Foster's his name. I said, Robert, and I kind of told him some things I was going to say. I said, Robert, if I'm off base, tell me. He said, no, Coach, we're so proud of Roosevelt. He said, it would hurt us. It would hurt us bad to change that name, because we talked to our friends, we talked to our family, and, Teddy Roosevelt wasn't probably completely different than some of the other people that, if you do the research, you can find things in his life. I mean, there's not a person here, me included, if you had your life rolled on a big movie screen, that you wouldn't be embarrassed about something. I mean, that's true. And I understand there's some unforgivable things. There's some things we wish we could change. Maybe some of these men would come back today and apologize and say, but the standard in the time in which they live, it's not always fair to pull them out of there. I went to Von Steuben Grade School right over here. That's named after a guy who was a drill sergeant for George Washington. I don't know 2 facts about him. He might have been a good guy. He might have been a horrible person. I think you find the same thing true if you interviewed any of the Roosevelt students. They wouldn't be able to tell you 2 facts about any of them, and yet they're proud of the name. It's the name they're proud of. My father was the greatest man I ever knew. He was born during the Depression era. He graduated from high school when he was 26 years old, and he was driving the school bus, kids to the school. He wasn't a dropout, he was a drop-in. He went to school when he had a chance and got his high school diploma at 26 years old in a little North Dakota town. He was the most honest man I ever met. We were poor. We lived in a 100-year-old house, drove a 15-year-old car, and if there were a bunch of $100 bills that fell out of somebody's wallet, my dad would have scooped them up and raced after the guy to give them back to him. My father was used by teachers in Peoria as the model for discipline. We had 4 boys. Lived in a 100-year-old house, drove a 15-year-old car, never went out to eat because we couldn't afford to. I didn't know we were poor till I got older. My mom and dad took us to church. We're at every meal. And my dad, when I did something wrong, gave me the belt. He never hit me out of anger. He hit me when I did something wrong. Now, I didn't use that standard with my son. I never laid a hand on my son. But my father, during the era that I grew up, was using the best he knew how. The spare the rod, spoil the child. Do I hate my father for that? I love my father. I think he's the greatest man that ever lived. But to judge him out of his era, he'd be in jail. You call Child and Family Services, the guy over there next door is hitting his kids with a belt, he'd be in jail. So I'm using that point, I guess, to drive home that to judge something out of its era completely, I'm not sure, you know, like I said, that's all fair because all of us would fall short. All of us. Dr. Martin Luther King was one of the greatest men, in my opinion, ever lived. And yet you can find things in his life, if you put it up on a screen or, you know, you look into history, there'd be people that shake their heads and say maybe he shouldn't be honored like he is. But you got to look at totality. I don't want to be judged. I'm a Christian. I hope God doesn't judge me by the worst thing I ever did in my life. I hope he takes a look at my whole life. And with that being said, I thank you for the time. I thank you gave me the opportunity. I loved Roosevelt. I loved it, and my kids loved it. And I fear that if you take that away from them, that name, because that's what they hear, I'm afraid, okay, that they would feel pain. And I don't want those kids to have anything taken away from them. Thank you.
I think we had a couple of people maybe that came in later. If you wanted to speak, there's a card that you fill out to come up here. So if you wanted to give that to the secretary, that would be good. The next person up, Mr. Eric Burns.
I want to pass around a photo. I like it back though, also. And I apologize for being late.
Sir, you may want to unmask while you,
Okay.
there you go.
I'm so
Easier.
used to it, I'm sorry. My name is Eric Burns, and I got a chance to meet late Reverend C.T. Vivian, that's what that picture is. I had moved away from here, and I was in Jacksonville, Florida, and we was at a CLC meeting. And I thought I saw him when I was younger, but I didn't really recognize him because the time spent, because it was over 40-some years. Anyway, when I saw him, what came to my mind was, I said, I believe I saw you before. I said, did you come to my church, Zion Baptist? Because at the time, Dr. Garrett would invite a lot of people there. And he so happened to tell me in this picture, he told me I got married in Peoria. And I'm not sure what everybody else said about C.T. Vivian or what's going on, because I just relocated here a couple years ago. But my thing is, we need to honor this man because of what he has done. And as you can see in this picture, he's not no young man at the time, but he's still fighting for civil rights. And I'm not sure, and there's a lot of things about Thomas Jefferson, and if you was to flash my name, you'll see this, that, and the other. But what's wrong with honoring the things that he did for this city? What's wrong with the things that he has done over a lifetime? So that's why I'm here and giving Reverend C.T. Vivian his just dues. And it ain't about what presidents and others have done. Let's look at those who are in our lifespan has done something, and the name change needs to happen. Reverend C.T. Vivian should have his high school, give him his just dues. And thank you.
Thank you, sir. The next speaker, Marie Lindahl.
Good evening. My only thing that I want to say on this is, I hear what's being said about TJ. I understand the history of the past and all that. I understand that another name has been given from another person, and my reluctancy on it, my reservations on it, is you can find fault in anybody. I mean, you can look at 100 different people and someone is going to find fault somewhere. I only know of one person that lived a faultless life. But there is fault with every possible name you could put out there, even a reverend. My other concern is, because it is a reverend, you're bringing in religion into this. Possibility it's no longer a black and white situation. It becomes, if we're going to name after a Christian, are we also going to look at Muslim? Are we going to look at Asian? Are we going to look at Jews, Buddhism? I mean, it just opens up a whole new avenue that I think is going to cause a conflict. So Sorry, I'm kind of nervous. I don't know why. But those are the things that I'm thinking through as a parent and as a teacher that we should look at as we look at names. I'm not saying he wasn't a wonderful person, you know, the Reverend isn't, but it's something that does happen as you put that in there. If you put religion in, you're going to have others that want to share that platform. So just something to consider.
Was there anybody in the audience that wanted to speak? Because if I don't have any more cards up here, but in the judgment of the chair, if either one of my board member friends would like to make a statement, I'd be more than willing to let you go ahead if you want to do that now. Yes, Mr. Knapp.
In fairness, I'd just like to tell these people, this has been talked about at board meetings on and off now for 8 months. And there have been other things, many of the things that have been mentioned here have been repeated by others in here, and it's nice to see the community involved.
Thank you. Yes.
My name is Valerie Timms. I didn't fill a card out, but
Ms. Timms, if you could, after you get done speaking, fill a card just for our
yeah,
record,
I will.
please. Thank you.
Thank you. I hear the history part of it, and I hear the black and white part of it. I hear the religious part of it now. I think this all started out as actually focusing on a national hero. This man has received the highest honor in the country that can be given to a citizen, and that he came from the Peoria community, okay? So take away the race, take away the religion, take away that we're not going to throw history and sweep it under the rug, but the fact that it's not so much the, well, why not? It's before we're talking about the why this, why that, why him, why whatever. But the question is, why not him? He's a person that, as he said, deserves to be honored, just like Dr. Maud Sanders, okay? Now, me personally, I do think that we recognize people in our community who have given back to the community and continue to give back to the community as such, but most of these people are deceased. But my thing is, yes, it is okay to pinpoint a Jewish person or an Indian person or a Latino person who has contributed to our community. And hopefully, when these names are changed, there is just more added history that our students will get. Because I know for a fact the school that changed to Dr. Maud Sanders, they did understand who that was. I was a teacher of Valeska Hinton. I grew up with Valeska Hinton. I know what she did for not only Peoria, but for the state. Did they say that a lot? No, they didn't. But I made it a part as a teacher on my part to make sure that the kids at Valeska did know. So my class put on a whole day, Valeska Hinton Day, and they learned facts about her. They learned that not only was she an advocate and a person who helped the people have fair housing and worked for so much in this city, that she also was a fun person. She was a golfer. She was the designer. She put on fashion shows across Peoria. The fun stuff about these people too, their life, their everyday life that they can relate to. So it is the part of the district to make sure that we know for a fact, why is this person that is Latino contributed to the community? Why is this African American person so important to the community? I can stand up here and say that one of our schools right now should be named Romeo Garrett because he did so much. So we have streets named after some of these people, but if we did do this across the board and across ethnic lines, and we did say, why not this person? Then these kids would be. If they went to Roosevelt, I went to Peoria High, okay? I love Peoria High. That was my alma mater. Roosevelt, my family went through there and everything. But that is a feeling. That is an emotion that we have and we connect to our schools. Now, just because you can change the name, I really don't feel that that's going to actually change how you students are going to lose that name of that school. They're still going to buy in and know that that was the school that they went to and they were connected to and they played basketball and football and their favorite teacher, a first grade teacher that made an impression is there. They will remember that. And if you change the name, that's not going to take that away. So my thing is, why not? And I would like to know if the name was to be changed to Carver or to Bonakin or to some other names that we could come up, Cohen and whatever, would we have had all of this discussion over the months? Think about that too. Would we? I don't know. But I just wonder. I don't know if it would go on as much as it has this long. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stevens. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Misty Brooks, and I've been a teacher in District 150 for 31 years. I taught 19 years at Ting Primary School until it closed, and I've been at Thomas Jefferson for 12 years now. And I mean, listening to some of the people, you're right. I don't understand maybe some of the feeling, and I've been educated a little bit tonight on just, you know, some of the background that may affect people different than it affects me. But I'm just, as a teacher, I've just always worked on kind of like you, like I know the kids kind of buy into the school, and I just want to know, I just want to be the best teacher I can be for students. And I guess I'm thinking, is there a way that we can use the money to really build like to work together as a community? Instead of changing the name, could we, bring people together and maybe have speakers, for my students? I want to learn as much as I can. I want to be the best teacher I can be for my students. And I just feel, and I'm always kind of asking myself, what can I do different? Like, how can I understand their situations? Because to me, it's about building relationships with students. As far as like teaching them, I can teach them, but if they don't believe that I believe in them, or they don't believe that I respect them, or the parents don't feel that I support them, then it doesn't matter what the name of the school is. I don't feel like I'm gonna, make a difference in their lives. And so for me, I guess, I really do, I get emotional about it because I do want to be the best teacher for my students. I want to understand their situations. I want to be able to, my parents, I want to be able to relate. I want them to know that I'm on their side. So my only thing is, I'm thinking, if we change the name of the school, is that going to make as big a difference as if we could find ways that we use the monies to build the community so that we can, understand or have programs or, highlight individuals that have been, all individuals that have been a part of making Peoria a great place. So I don't know, just a different perspective, but I thank you because I do think that, we need to, I do want to understand. I don't want to, I don't know, that's it. Thank you.
Ms. Brooks, if you get a chance, if you could fill out a card before you leave, please, and do that. I'm gonna, unless we have anybody else in-house that would like to speak.
I did have some comments.
Okay, this is Board President.
Thank you, Mr. Walder. I have not spoken on this topic. I have been waiting for it to become an action item so that I would debate it when it came to the floor. I also declined to go on the radio program because the information that I found I felt was inappropriate to put on the air. This is a forum for this discussion, so I will go through my comments tonight. Did you go through the timeline of where this all began? I have a brief timeline of events that I can present so people can understand where we came from. September of last year, Vice President Wilson raised a concern about several of our school buildings that were named after historical figures with questionable backgrounds and views and conduct. On September 21st of 2020, last year, this board voted to rename 6 buildings. December 14th, Reverend C.T. Vivian's name was presented in public comments by a few different individuals. January of this year, I made a recommendation, and this is just, it's a recommendation. I have one vote on the board. I recommended to the board that we rename Thomas Jefferson for C.T. Vivian, commenting that we had that authority under board policy number 4:152, naming of buildings and facilities and honoring of individuals. This is the process we took with Maud Sanders with the addition of town hall meetings. The other 5, I recommended that we have just an open process where people, just like you're saying, all of our different constituencies and communities can come up with names that reflect maybe somebody that's important to them that, that we, I had no dog in that fight. C.T. Vivian was presented, I agreed with that, and that's what I recommended. The board preferred to have the open process for all 6 buildings, so that's what we did. We opened that process up. February 22nd, we opened a 30-day window to receive names for that, to rename Thomas Jefferson. That window went from February 22nd to March 22nd. Support for C.T. Vivian still emerged. April 12th, an action item to rename Thomas Jefferson to C.T. Vivian was tabled due to technical issues. Issue number 1, recommendation had not come from the building committee. Issue number 2, the action item did not have 2 signatures, the necessary 2 signatures from board members. It only had 1. April 15th, building committee met and put forward this town hall meeting. So that's where we are tonight. When the school renaming issue emerged in September, I began to read about Thomas Jefferson first. All right, since I was loosely following the Hemmings family in the news in the past several years as they tried to prove their lineage to Thomas Jefferson, the information that I found was disturbing. And this is taken from Monticello.org. Although Jefferson frequently wrote against slavery, he spoke against slavery, calling slavery a moral depravity and a hideous blot. He owned more slaves than any other president. He owned over 600 people. Jefferson's belief in the necessity of abolition was intertwined with his racial beliefs. He thought that white Americans and enslaved blacks constituted 2 separate nations who could not live peacefully in the same country. Jefferson's belief that blacks were racially inferior and as incapable as children, coupled with the slaves' presumed resentment from their former owners, made their removal from the United States an integral part of Jefferson's emancipation scheme. It's an extract from his notes on the state of Virginia, section 14, page 144. This is available through Google Books. Deep-rooted prejudices entertained by whites, 10,000 recollections by the blacks of injuries they have sustained, new provocations, the real distinctions which has made will divide us into parties and produce convulsions which will probably never end but in the extermination of one race or the other. I will read that for you again. Produce convulsions that will probably never end but in the extermination of one race or the other. And I would bet you that he wasn't talking about himself being exterminated. To these objections, which are political and maybe added others, which are physical and moral, the first difference strikes us is that of color. He continues on that skin color. And you go to Google Books, read his memoir, you can get the entire thing. This is an extract. They have less hair on their face and body. They secrete less by the kidneys and more by the glands of the skin, which gives them a strong and disagreeable odor. The degree of transpiration renders them more tolerant of heat and less so of cold than whites. Comparing them by faculties of memory, reason, and imagination, it appears to me that in memory they are equal to whites. In reason, much inferior, as I think one could scarcely be found tracing and comprehending the investigations of Euclid. And I would ask the late President Jefferson how he thought Euclid felt when he was educated in Alexandria, which is Lower Egypt, which is in Africa. And the megalithic geometric structures aligned to the constellations that were there preceding him by thousands of years. I would ask him what he thought about that as far as mathematics and geometry. But I digress. Jefferson continues that in the imagination they are dull, tasteless, and anomalous. This is taken from Monticello.org/Sally Hemings. I believe most of us are familiar with Sally Hemings. I will just note that he owned her. imposed himself on her to have 6 children, beginning when she was 15, and he never freed her, even after his death. And the section from Smithsonian.com, critical turning point. In fact, we'll just cut to it. Jefferson clearly, this was him giving advice to his colleagues. He was making a 4% profit on black people. And his friends that were losing money, because we talked about the fact that, people there were some hard times around. He said, and let me find his quote here. Let's see, he writes that an acquaintance of his who had suffered financial reverses should have invested in Negroes. That was his advice. And on the kids that are Thomas Jefferson's age, 10, 12, and 11-year-old boys, these boys were whipped to work in his nail factory. These are kids, and this is why, for me, I feel this on a different level than maybe some of you. The school, he owned a population bigger than the school. The boys in the school would have been forced to work in his nail factory, and we're honoring him. Maybe that made sense when the school was named, but as a board policy 4:152, it shall be the prerogative of the Board of Education to name all school buildings and facilities to authorize plaques honoring individuals for outstanding contributions to public education. This does not rise to that to me at this juncture in time. On C.T. Vivian, I'll just give you a few bullet points. He lived and worked in Peoria, beginning his career at the Carver Center, joined and led efforts to end segregation locally through Peoria's Interracial Fellowship, worked with Martin Luther King's organization fighting for education and the rights of all people, participated in Freedom Rise in Mississippi in 1961, created the Vision Program in 1966, helping 700 students attend college. That later became Upward Bound. And this is from USA Today. I've got the link if anybody's interested. Just like I said, to sum it up, these are the things that I read. I have not researched the other school names. I will leave that to other board members to do, but I took the first one and I researched it, and I just can't agree that we should have in today's environment. I just don't believe that is honorable. I'm not saying dig the man up or take him off around Mount Rushmore. I have no authority over street names. I'm talking about a school where we're sending our kids in the community. That's what I feel about it.
Thank you, President Shaw. Ms. Costick, any comments you'd like to share?
Just very brief comments in regards to it. The first thing that I would like to say is, as an African American, as a black woman, walk a mile in my shoes. There is not one school in this city that is named honoring an African American. Not one. Am I correct? Who?
Valesky.
Oh, Valesky. I'm sorry. Those were just recent. Okay, Valeska and Maud Sanders. I'm sorry, but outside of that, there are none. There are none. It's about teaching our children about our culture. It's about the history of these children. They need to know. I agree with Ms. Timms when she said, if we were talking about naming a school after Pete Vanaken, after Joe Stoll, would we be having this conversation? I doubt it. I doubt it very seriously. And so when we recommend renaming these schools because of the representation that of those individuals, the reputation, the history, then I see nothing wrong with that. I don't care whether we name them after a Latino, Irishman. It does not make me a difference. But let's just look at it and understand. These children deserve a right to know about all history, and that includes Black history. So when it comes to Thomas Jefferson, and after I did my research on Thomas Jefferson also, and it hurts. It hurts that to know that individuals were treated in this manner. And I'm going to say again, walk a mile in my shoes. It's different. Mr. Powers, I believe, you know, I felt what you said. I understood it. The thing is that we are not trying to erase history. We are just trying to enhance it, to bring it forth, bring it to the forefront with naming schools, with naming especially Thomas Jefferson. After someone that is notable, someone that has been in the community, has contributed to the community. In fact, in this term, if we're talking C.T. Vivian, to the world, to the United States. Again, this man has achieved the highest award to be given to a civilian. And it's not about him being Reverend C.T. Vivian. It's about C.T. Vivian and the contributions that he has made. That's kind of really all I have to say.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the room? Yes, Mr. Murphy.
So, thank you very much for that. And this is my opinion on it, and I know you weren't in the room earlier, President Shaw, whenever I spoke, but this is kind of one of the things that I really wanted to drive home, was that we can argue or discuss all day on a person, their history, what they've done to contribute to society, what they did at home in their own personal life, and find fault with probably several of these people. One of the reasons why I'm in favor of renaming the schools after not people, however you say that, after not people, is because then you're looking at it from a financial standpoint, is that if we're going to change these names, we change them once, and that's really the end of that discussion about that. So that we're not changing and spending all this money on renaming it down the road whenever someone finds something. And I'm not, again, I'm not saying that they would, but I'm saying on Reverend or whomever. When you're talking about wanting to embrace African American history more so with the history that's currently being taught, I know that there are, and then this is kind of more on a separate note, but the two separate history classes that we can teach, why not teach them together and embrace both histories? Because I think that whenever you separate them and allow kids to pick which ones they want to pick, you're still promoting segregation and in a way still promoting ignorance, because you're still not teaching them what the other side did and what the other side contributed. So I would love to have a blended model of history of both of those curriculums so that everyone gets the same chance to learn about the same people. And that's why I do support changing them to be renamed not after people. I feel like, if you go a number direction, which other school districts, larger districts like ours do, it's easier. It might not be as warm to say I went to school number 5 rather than to say I went to Charter Oak. I think that you kind of have a little bit more maybe pride in your school whenever you can relate it to something rather than a number. But I do support that idea because it just gives way to not having these discussions about the actual renaming of the schools in the future. When you're talking about going to school, obviously I don't relate the same way as somebody else might by going to Thomas Jefferson and feeling like that was an oppression to my people, to my history.
But if you were to send, other kids to schools who, the idea about gay and lesbian, people who have contributed to those societies, and when people hear that that might be blended into our system, oh, that's gross, that's disgusting, we shouldn't be doing that, I'm not teaching my kids about that. Same as you're saying about we're not teaching them about how he was a reverend, we're not teaching them about how he was gay, or she was gay, or she was transgender, or he was transgender. We're teaching about what they contributed to society. So blending those things all together, can you imagine being a small African-American child and going to a school that was named after someone who treated African-Americans in a horrible way? It would probably make you feel sad if that's how it was presented to you. Imagine being a gay or lesbian youth and going to a school where none of those people supported your lifestyle and you had to feel that way. Difference in race and lifestyle, and that's a whole different topic as well. But I'm just saying, consider the idea about just renaming the schools after something rather than someone, and hopefully we can move forward with merging our history classes so that it reflects for all the students. So that's all.
I'm going to, because I am the chair, and because I let Mr. Murphy have the second bite of the apple. Anybody else who spoke earlier would like to, Mr. Knapp, Mr. Byrne, if you guys please, I'm going to give you another couple of minutes. Go ahead, sir.
I think it's very important. I've attended probably as many or more board meetings than anybody in here. Seriously. There was a banner back here on the wall that the school district put up, and Mr. Sammy Sierra, who's passed, who's a Hispanic man from the South Side, pointed out the fact that there were black kids and white kids holding hands in this banner, spread across the whole room. And he brought that up. Not once, not twice, not 3 times. Every time he came here for about, 2 months, he said, there are no Hispanic kids in that picture. 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 You know what the school board did? Nothing. Nothing. They didn't even respond to him, basically. I don't think people understand what's coming. Hispanics are already the second most populous group in the United States. And with what's happening at the border, you're going to see Hispanics, there are going to be more Hispanics than there are Caucasians and blacks put together eventually in this country. That's my prediction. I don't know if that'll come in 100 years, but that will happen. And what I'm saying is the battle to come is the 1776 curriculum versus the 1619 curriculum. And you're going to see the battle of the bulge on that one. You've already seen it in private schools out east that pay $60,000 for the kids to go to school at Burley, and they have said, we're pulling our kids out of here. If you're going to teach that crap, our kids are not staying in the school. So you got issues, and I agree with Mr. Murphy. Change it to tree names. I wouldn't recommend trees. I think numbers are more generic than trees. You understand what I'm saying? Somebody will say, well, I didn't want to be, a mulberry tree, or something like that, But anyway, it's ridiculous what's going on. The Board of Education is not leading. They're reacting. They're reacting to Black Lives Matter, which is a Democrat organization. Democrats get that money, from Black Lives Matter. It doesn't go, the top 10 recipients of the money were white Democrats, not black Democrats, white Democrats. The black Democrats, the black Republicans got nothing. And they're never going to get nothing from Black Lives Matter. That's just a fact. And we need to deal with those facts, but we need to get past this and name the schools for numbers.
Mr. Burns, I believe. Go ahead, sir.
But my thing about, when I said reverend, when I was introduced to Mr. C.T. Vivian, I was a youngster, and it's out of honor. Just like with my principal at Franklin. If I was to see him now, it would be Mr. Johnson. The Reverend was just a title to give him the honor that I was taught at such a young age. It didn't have nothing to do with religion. He could have been a doctor, and that's what I would have called him. Just like with Dr. Romeo B. Garrett, I called him doctor because that's what I was told as a young child. It didn't have nothing to do with religion. It was the title that he earned. And if I offend you about religion, because that's not my intent. I was giving a person honor as
as a person, I was supposed to do as respect of who he is.
Sure.
So my intentions wasn't about religion. My intentions was about the honor of what this man lived. He was on either prize. I don't know if I would have been one of those ones to get hit up in the head with a billy club or whatever it was and smile. I don't think that was in my character, and I would have fought back, but he did. And that's one of the reasons I searched to find. I said, I got a picture of him, and I didn't know where it was at, but I found it, and that's why I wanted to share with you all, because he making an impact in this country. And if I hadn't had a recollection of, I think I saw him before, I would have never known he got married in Peoria until I would have brought that up to him. Because there's so much history that's not taught. And I should have known this. I lived here. So thank you for your time.
I'm going to go Spanky just because I love that first name. You're up next, Mr. Powers, and this is Miss Jackson. Okay.
Thomas Jefferson was a slave owner, deplorable man, 200 years, over 200 years before Black Lives Matter, the organization, was incorporated. The same reason why Christopher Columbus was taken down, because he did not discover America. He is also a deplorable man who and many people regard him as the founder of the trans-European slave trade. So, and to what you said was about education, about there being 2 American history classes, you're absolutely correct. I was taught 1 history class. I didn't have an option to get 2. I was taught white American history. And they intentionally erased every contribution that black people did out of the book intentionally. We got a paragraph about Crispus Attucks, and then they sky jumped all the way over to Martin Luther King. That was it. So I'm happy that the board has decided to incorporate Black History 365 as a new curriculum, but teach American history in an authentic and real manner. Now, the reason why I disagree with the schools being named after numbers is because we hold these schools as they are monuments to great Americans. Americans that have did great things. It's almost like something that we can aspire to be. To be great, to get a school named after you, to have a statue named after you, because of your contributions to America. It's not about you. I think that if we actually had people who could contribute, who made great contributions to America to make it a more perfect union, I think that our kids, the students, will also look forward to making great contributions to America and to Peoria in particularly. So those are a few things that I want to talk about. And as far as Dr. Vivian being a reverend, I agree with what Ms. Tim said. There are millions of reverends. There has probably been billions over the last thousands of years that are not worthy of a school being named after them or deserve a Presidential Medal of Freedom. So I think, again, that Dr. Vivian deserves it. I think that he has earned it. He has spent his entire life. He was 94 when I met him in Atlanta, and he was a president of the SCLC, the organization that Dr. King and Baird, Rustin, and all of them founded that helped to make America during the Civil Rights Movement or the Nonviolent Movement. So I definitely think that it should be changed, and I do not think that we should go to a numbering system. I think that it should be something that is earned, and in under 2020 and 2021, in the 21st century, Thomas Jefferson does not meet the bare minimum merit of being named, and this school named after him. If that is the case, then we would not even fathom sending your kid to Hitler High. Thomas Jefferson was a worse person than Hitler. So he does not deserve it. Change the school, and again, what he said, teach American history the right way, and stop taking our story out of the main, stop taking Black history out of the whole American story.
Mr. Powers.
Thank you very much. Were you a product of Peoria schools?
Yeah, I went to White, and there is no White. So you talk about
No, I mean, you went to all Peoria
Glen Oak,
schools?
White, Peoria High. Yes.
Okay, all right. Well, you're very articulate, and I enjoy listening to you. I didn't agree with everything, but I did agree with some things that you said for sure. And I am not here to cast any pain on a black person. I like your comment. I have not walked that mile in your moccasins, and until you have, you cannot speak to the pain, you know. And so I fully apologize. Anything I say, you know, hits that nerve because I don't want to hit that nerve. Racism is taught. It isn't something you're born with. My little boy, when he was 2 years old, we went up to Peoria State and watched a football game with my wife, and a little black child, about 2 rows back, about the same age as he was there with his parents. My little boy scoots up there before we even, you know, and he's got his little bag of popcorn, shares it with the little boy, they kiss each other. And that's an example. Racism is, you're not born with it, it's taught. I interviewed for a job here in 150. I went to 150. I'm proud of the education you gave me. Thank you. Thank all of you. I know your salaries. You know, I know what they are. Am I correct? They used to be this. I don't think they've raised it yet.
School board, they doubled it.
We doubled it.
Every one of you, thank you. Thank you for what you're doing. This is, you know, this is it. This is what's going to make our country great again. Schools, you know, communities, school board members, and the sacrifices you make. And I am so appreciative of what it gave me. So any comments that I make are from the heart. That I really, you know, I don't want to hurt any kid. I really don't. I don't intentionally. My kids at Roosevelt, like I said, I know they're so proud of that name, that school. That's all they know, and that was my point. You know, I don't want to see those kids feel pain if that's taken away. And this lady that spoke over here, I hope she's right. I hope that the school name doesn't mean anything more, and the school's there, and I hope she's right. But if she's wrong, and my kids feel pain, then that's where I feel the pain. And I could march them in here. I guarantee. I talked to one of them on the phone. Like I said, I could march a ton of them in here, and I would be shocked if they wouldn't be hurt that their school name was being changed. But that being said, Mrs. Caustic and other speakers, I respect everything you said. If there is pain there that I am, you know, that I am overlooking in another picture, forgive me. Just understand that I was trying to protect the pain of some kids on the south side that didn't have a lot. I love those kids. Those kids love me. I mean, I worked with Dr. Karat. I love Dr. Karat. I taught with her 2 or 3 years. She loves me. And I mean, I don't have a bad word to say about that woman. I think she's a great person. I think she has a heart of gold. And I really believe totally she'd say the same about me, because I'm not here to inflict pain. I'm here to hopefully, you know, give my perspective that I don't want to see kids hurt. I want to see Peoria schools great.
Ernst and Ms. Jackson.
I don't think this is changing the name is about race. It's about honor. It's about treating people right. It's about a man had no regard to African Americans, and our kids are in those schools, and we never told them their history and what this is all about. And they're gonna learn, and they're gonna ask you, why do you tell us this? This is about honor. C.T. Vivian was somebody I met when I was 13 years old. I met his wife because she was director of the girls department at Carver Center. He taught us in a way that I wish everyone in this room could have sat at his feet. He taught us Black history, he taught us history of Indians, he taught us history of everything that you can imagine. When he left here, went to Tennessee, so he could start working in the bus rides. He was beat so badly on the steps of the Capitol in Atlanta, and he was beaten as he's marched trying to get people to vote. I remember as a child, my father putting us in a wagon once a month, taking us into town so they could try to register to vote and had to pass a test that no one could have passed. So I remember how he fought for those things. He was an honorable man. And we're talking about whether or not we want to change the name of the school to an honorable man, to a man that was dishonorable to the African American race. Not only that, if you remember, if you read, he started the Trail of Tears. Andrew Jackson finished it. He's the one that set up the reservation system for the Indians. That's why that we're fighting this whole thing about the reservation, is because of Thomas Jefferson. He started it. Let's talk about honor. How we honor a person that most of us that grew up in this city knew. And that's the Honorable C.T. Vivian.
Yes, ma'am.
As the only thing I wanted to say is I'm definitely not against a religion. I'm a Christian myself. My thing was putting the Reverend on the name of the school. If it's C.T. Vivian and we leave that portion out, I would not have reservations. That's kind of my thing about what I look at when I see the name Reverend, because we only call reverends if they're church leaders.
Okay.
And that's where I get hung up in the whole separation of church and state. So that's
Okay,
all I
didn't
wanted to add.
understand that. Yeah.
You
Oh,
go
add
yeah,
to
yeah.
that.
Well, first of all, I would like to say that I appreciate everyone who came out here and spoke. Wherever side of the issue you're on, I appreciate the fact that you took your time to come out here and speak. And I definitely, I didn't understand your point
Okay.
about the Reverend. He's Dr. C.T. Vivian as well. And also, since everybody's breaking out the pictures, I also had a picture with him. So we figured I'd just, throw that in there. But like I said, I appreciate everyone's comments tonight.
Oh, no.
Oh, go ahead,
I'm
go ahead.
trying to get Dan's attention.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm finished. Like I said, I just, wherever you stand, the comments have been respectful. And he still has control, so he can call me. But yeah, I just wanted to say I appreciate everyone who spoke. Thank you.
I have to apologize because as I was speaking, I should not have said there is not one, but Maud Sanders, Dr. Sanders, and Valeska, I had kind of put on the other side and basically speaking of all of the other schools. So I think I misstated that. Because, of course, I know Valeska Hinton, was named after Valeska. Valeska was a relative of mine. Valeska Terry and Ernestine knows. So, and Dr. Maud Sanders, I spent a many a day in her office down on Jefferson Street. So, my apologies. I am aware of that. I was speaking of the other schools, and I guess my mind was working faster than my mouth. Or my mouth, one or the other, so, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm Julie Jenkins. I'm a veteran teacher at Thomas Jefferson. And I just want to say that in January, when our very own president, President Biden, took office in January, he proudly displayed portraits of all past presidents, many past presidents. And in fact, Thomas Jefferson is one of those that are displayed in President Biden's Oval Office currently. And I think one of the reasons he stated for that was because he wanted to be reminded of different viewpoints and not to diminish all the atrocities that this person has done. He wanted world leaders that convene on this platform, and that is the Oval Office, would be able to think about that. I think that was the whole premise of it. But I find that interesting that Thomas Jefferson is displayed in the Oval Office currently. And I agree with what this man over here stated about pride. I constantly run into individuals, adults, when they ask me where I work, where I teach, I'll probably say Thomas Jefferson. And no doubt, their eyes will light up. They have a connection there with the community. Community schools bring people together. And as soon as they hear Thomas Jefferson, they will remember, they think back in time, they have connections there. So I don't really think we can diminish the fact that people do make connections through their adult lives, experiences that they've had. And also I wonder what system of vetting the district will use in regards to thinking about maybe leaning towards a person. What historians will you contact that are neutral based, maybe not from this area, that will be able to vet a person accordingly, whatever that may include.
It's a good question. Thank you for asking that.
Thank you.
What I'm going to do now, I had promised people who would.
I think you had one more. Did you put your hand down?
Oh, yeah. Please go ahead. You haven't spoken yet, please.
Sorry, I'm totally gonna come out of left field and throw a wrench into this. I'm coming here as a special needs parent. I have a child that attends around. And I know you guys are on the Building and Grounds Committee, and I was just wondering, if there's a possibility ever of using money that is gonna go to change the school, the name of the school, to maybe updating the structure. The children in the round have no windows and no doors and no real classroom, so to speak. And it just kind of upsets me a little bit, knowing my child goes to school there and doesn't get to see the outside world unless they go outside or when she's coming to and from school. I totally, I appreciate all the effort you guys are putting into the name change. So like I said, I know I'm coming out of left field, but I just wanted to let you know that there's probably other parents like me who would appreciate some comments or the timeline on when structure could be built.
It's a valid point, and I will answer this. Being on the Building and Grounds Committee, I was in the round about a month ago, and you're right. I think there are some structural changes we can make there, and that will get brought up at our next meeting. I understand what you're saying. It is somewhat overcrowded, too, because you've got some rooms that are special needs rooms where you have a two-person special ed person. Those of you that understand, it's a special needs kid that needs two adults to work with them. And when you're in a really small, compressed room, that makes it even more difficult and stuff with it. And so you did touch on a subject I'm going to bring up. This was from a Rita Waller, and she says, I'm a teacher at Thomas Jefferson. I was shocked to learn that it will cost the school district over $20,000 to change our name. I believe it's a terrible waste of funds, the amount of money in this way. Setting aside that Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence, a great achievement, everybody makes mistakes. I do not want to be the judge of anyone. I know people will be differing opinions on the subject. When our children are struggling to achieve academic and social emotional success, I can think of many other beneficial ways to spend $20,000. Her number on that figure was about what it cost for Maud Adams. Maud Adams was approximately $20,000. I've seen people posting on Facebook that's going to cost $50,000 or $70,000. It was $20,000 at Maud Adams. I have, pardon? Maud Sanders. And so what we had was, I had Mick Willis do some cost estimates. It will cost approximately that much for any elementary change. There's just no way around name change and other things we're going to do. Middle schools, however, it's going to cost a lot more than that. And the problem with that with middle schools is that you now have the whole issue of team uniforms. And in some places you're going to have to change. If they've got a stage and they have a name, you have to change the curtain. You've got signage that you've got to do. And Coach knows at Roosevelt, if you've got to change that, and all of a sudden you're changing, whoever you're changing it to, your uniforms now have to be changed. And so there's an inherent cost in that. And we're just trying to be transparent about that. There will be a cost, and we're not denying that. And so what the young lady is saying that about here, and that's what this lady is saying, that couldn't we use that money for something else? But I think the board, without assuming that they recognize that there'll be some cost in a name change. And that I do have the original letter that I gave to Mr. Shaw here, which was the resolution. There are 8 or 9 of them back there, so if anybody wants to take that, that was the actual vote that was taken, I believe in September.
September, yeah.
Yeah, it was taken September 20th, I believe, on that time with it. And that vote passed. And what that vote passes is that there will be those 6 names were voted on to be changed. It didn't say what the names would be changed to. It just said that those would be changed. And before Mr. Shaw got here, what we did said the only thing that was amended on that was doing a sequential order. and Thomas Jefferson was the first one to be mentioned, so which is why we're here tonight. If some of you've been here since before 6, wanted to leave now, you can. I'm going to read a couple more things into the record, and so this will be like an exciting episode of C-SPAN. But I did commit to these people, if they sent emails or texts, that I would go ahead and read them. This is from Lynn Carlisle, sending to the whole school board. This is to give my notice my displeasure of the suggestions to rename Thomas Jefferson Primary. It was named to remember the third president. My belief of the school board to provide direction for a strong American history education to the students of the extraordinary life of Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson was a spokesman for democracy and American founding father. At age 33, he drafted the Declaration of Independence, where he states a strong condemnation of slavery. In Washington, D.C., at the Washington Monument, inscribed in marble, are the words from Thomas Jefferson: "I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just, that his justice cannot sleep forever. Do not erase him from the face of a Peoria school building. I count 27 schools in District 150 with only 5 named after past presidents. I see no justification for choosing Thomas Jefferson Primary to be name changed. As thinking, common sense adult, let us use our energies and crusades toward the education of students. Let us promote American history of our founding fathers rather than erasing them." I want to share thank you for any of the people that came here and spoke. Whatever side of the issue it takes courage to do that. And we have written down your comments. There'll be a report from us to the full board at the next board meeting. And again, thank you all for taking the time to do that. This is from Ms. Zielinski. As products of District 150 and taxpayers of Peoria County Board for 42 years, we adamantly opposed the renaming of Thomas Jefferson Grade School. First, one of us grew up entirely in District 150 community and saw and heard absolutely no communication from any member of the student body suggesting that the name of the school drove a negative impact. In fact, no mention was ever made of the school's name in my entire 12 years within the District 150 community. Second, both of our children attended District 150. Again, no communication with the student body remotely suggested that the school name ever drove negative sentiment. Third, there is an absolute guarantee that the problems that District 150 staff are dealing with today are driven by a much bigger issue than school name. To think that changing a name over a building is going to magically improve your situation is fooling no one. The time spent on this issue and the possibility that you proceed with it is an absolute waste of taxpayers' dollars, a habitual problem of this school district. Fourth, you have much bigger, higher priority issues that need to be addressed. You have a very significant percentage of students in your classrooms that are failing, students that are being passed to the next grade level with substandard grades, teachers paying enormous amounts out of their own pocket to manage classroom, inability to retain qualified staff, a serious lack of parental support, as well as diminishing level of taxpayer support. Fifth, and no lesser importance, Thomas Jefferson was the principal author of the Declaration of Independence and a proponent of democracy and individual rights. This country has and continues to evolve, an accomplishment for which we'd recognize as an achievement for Thomas Jefferson and our forefathers, for without this foundation, the fundamental freedoms which allow you to consider the renaming of the school may not have existed. We suggest, instead of wasting time considering renaming a school, that you assist teachers in educating the students on the positive things Thomas Jefferson accomplished for our country and take care of the business you were put into place to accomplish, which is to educate the children of Peoria, Illinois. Respectfully, Mark and Marcia Zielinski. This is from a Rebecca Jones. Mr. Walther, I'm very opposed to changing the names of Peoria Public Schools, which have been mentioned in earlier discussions. Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, and Roosevelt were very important figures in the history of our country. Peoria students learn from the past, the contributions and the mistakes. Please reconsider changing the names of these schools. Thank you for your time and attention of my opinion. Rebecca Jones. Mr. Walther, I hope you received this for the meeting tonight. We got short notice of the meeting today, and I will not be able to make it. This is from a Michelle Smith. I would love to see Thomas Jefferson name changed to Biltmore Heights Elementary. As you turn onto Florence from Sheridan, there is a sign that says, "Welcome to Biltmore Heights neighborhood." How nice it would be to see the school named after that, the neighborhood it's in. I, along with many others, are tired of schools being named after people. There is no reason for it, and in due time, something will come up about these people, and they will want to change the name again. Now, I would rather have the money go towards math curriculum, but if it's going to go through name change, I think Biltmore Heights would do our neighborhood justice. Please consider sharing this idea. And a brief one. I am both a teacher at TJ and a parent of Thomas Jefferson. I do not agree with this name change happening right now. I think there are more important things to concentrate at this point in time, such as updates to the building itself. Thank you. That's from Katie Lucky. This is from Amber Dean. I am a first grade teacher at Thomas Jefferson. I need to say this bluntly. Changing the name of our school is wrong. Thomas Jefferson was a famous historical person in our country's history. True, things he did are not right in today's world. Unfortunately, that was the norm for the time. People during that time era grew up seeing that they were doing certain things were okay. Thankfully, it is not okay today. I just hate to see that the board wants to delete our past by changing the name. However, if the name change at school must happen, do not name it after another person. If you're getting rid of a person's name, do not replace it with another name. Why not change it to Biltmore Heights Elementary? Our school is located in Biltmore Heights neighborhood. Rolling Acres is the same way. Please consider not changing the name, but if you do, please make it Biltmore Heights. Make the community stand out more. The other one was from a lady who came here.
You don't have to read mine.
Okay, thank you. This is from Christine Riven. I'd like to share my thoughts regarding the possibility of changing the name of school. Let me say first that I taught social studies as a classroom teacher for 20 years, and I am a firm believer that children must learn all of the country's history, including the ugly truths and wrongful ways of the past. I share the opinion of most American citizens, which the two worst things in American history were slavery and segregation. I believe both were wrong and both have negatively impacted our country. First and foremost, it seems irresponsible and absurd to spend any money on all that is required to change the name of the schools, even for just one school. Simply put, there are far more important things our district should be spending money on, especially at this time. Second, it seems misguided to rename a school because the original namesake participated in practices that were a fact of the time in a period where he lived, owning slaves in order to run a plantation in the pre-industrial area before the invention of machines like the cotton gin. Now that we know better, we do better, which is also true of the many things of the future. Also, as stated in the op-ed piece below, renaming things is like erasing the past and discrediting all the good in the original namesake contributed to the country. In our case, here at TJ, it's like dismissing or discrediting President Thomas Jefferson for all the good he did to our country. He was the third president of the United States after serving as Secretary of State and Vice President. He established the U.S. Military Academy. He advocated for religious freedom. Yes, Jefferson owned slaves, but he also released slaves, advocated for the emancipation of slaves, worked to outlaw slavery, and abolish the slave tribe. Why throw out the whole bushel of apples because of one rotten one? It's obvious to any educated person who does a little research for that Jefferson not only knew slavery was wrong, but worked to end it. So why turn a blind eye to all the good that Jefferson did in dishonoring him by removing him from the school? And then there's a reflection of an op-ed piece, which I won't receive. And from Ann Olemeyer, Dear PPS Board, I would like to express my concerns over the proposed name change with Thomas Jefferson. At this time, I feel it would be a frivolous expense and that money would be better used to repair or replace items used in our school. I'm a staff member at TJ. I also think changing the name of the building does not and cannot change history. As a nation, we have made a huge swing in our cultural sensitivity. While I believe it is important to highlight people of all races, I feel it's also right to keep the history of this country alive. We cannot and should not change our history to cover up the wrongs presented by leaders of our past, just like we should not forget the important works that helped develop our country into the great nation we have become. There are many things we need to work on as a nation, and many things go on a smaller scale. In our city, our school district, our neighborhoods, we need leadership that can stand up for what is right, not always what is popular. We need to recognize our leaders from the past and learn what they did was right and what was wrong. Where will we be in 200 years when a new generation of people stand and judges our leadership? Will they look back and decide all of our lifestyle choices were correct? Will they agree with we treated the members of the community? Will they decide in 200 years that we should rename schools because they do not like some of the choices that person or school was named after in that lifetime? Or will those people do their research and look at both the positive and negative attitudes of the individual and realize no person is perfect? Look at what appropriate behavior at the time in which they live and come to the conclusion that history is important, both good and bad. It is what made us what we are today. We cannot change history nor judge history based on standards of today. We need to teach respect of our past, present, and future. Thomas Jefferson was an imperfect person who did much to help shape the wonderful nation we have come. Even with our shortcomings, we are still lucky enough to be born in the United States of America, which wouldn't be a possibility without Thomas Jefferson. Sincerely, Ann Olemeyer. And then the last one is from Suzanne Spear. Good evening, sir. I am currently watching the town hall meeting and have watched all of this year's board meeting. Poor Suzanne doesn't have much of a life, I'm sorry. It greatly disappoints me that it has been a decision to rename 6 PSD schools when the expense could be better used with more important issues, teacher retention, recruitment, student resources. Unfortunately, it seems it is already a done deal. If that is the case, why do you need schools to be named after a person, as Mr. Murphy and others have suggested? If they must, for whatever crazy reason, be named after a person, why not a predominant white woman? Why not have a predominant Asian man or woman? Why not a predominant Hispanic man or woman? The list could go on and on. Why does it have to be named after an African-American person, and why that is the only option being discussed? Once again, as I'm sure many others feel, the money could be spent valid, remaining a concerned parent. Mr. Wilson wasn't here tonight. He had a coaching conflict, but that was an area that I did want him to address because after he had first introduced this, I asked him the question. I said, well, was your intent for this to be black-only people renamed? And he said, no, that was not his intent at all. It was people who had contributed to Peoria. And we've got 6 schools named out here. The intent has been to name after, I think pretty clear, a lot of favor for C.T. Vivian. But there are 5 other schools that are going to be facing this thing. And it was one of the things that a young lady brought up here and stuff with it too that had gone to Peoria High. Betty Friedan was a graduate of Peoria High, absolutely started some of the whole women's movement and stuff. There were other people that are well-known people and stuff that are out there. I mean, it was a name that was thrown and suggested. And so I'm not suggesting his name, but I'm just suggesting there were other people that were brought and there were people here. Historically, if you did as much research as our president did here on Thomas Jefferson, Mr. Knapp and I and some other people in here graduated from Woodruff High School. You might want to Google the history of E.N. Woodruff, who was the mayor of Peoria when we had one of the bawdiest towns in the entire Midwest and stuff with it. And that school was built. Franklin Delano Roosevelt came in with WPA money, and we built really one of the classic state-of-the-art schools at the time. And so they went to him and they said, what should we name it? And the mayor said, well, name it after me. He was still mayor. He didn't wait till he retired. He had him name it after him while he was still here. And some of the stuff that you will read about him, I'm not sure all of it's true, but it's a very interesting history. Peoria at that time was during Prohibition. But you could go downtown Main Street in Peoria. You could get a beer. You could find a slot machine. If you were real lucky, you might find a lady of the night in the same place. All that went in Peoria under the auspices of the mayor at that time. So when people look at the history, I did look some of the history. You should look up Ian Woodruff. It was named after, our school was named after that. So the history isn't all, but there were accomplishments that he did, but some of them maybe not so reputable. And so with it.
I think that's very important what you just said. The other 5 schools, and I've said this from the beginning, let those communities come forward and present names that are important to them. I'm not advocating for anyone. I advocated for one person for one school.
Right.
And I did the research on one person in one school. Other board members may take up the cause on other schools, and this is also something that we're not trying to do in a day. We're 8 months into this right now. So, and this is still one school. So, again, this is not something that I have a list of black people and I'm going to try to rename these schools. I would like for the communities to come forward. We have different constituencies all over Peoria, different historical figures. Let's bring them forward and let's talk about it. So, go ahead.
Go ahead, sir.
Okay, the things that you said from those emails, are those emails going to get answered or they're just going to be spoken? Because I mean, like what he was saying, there's other people that could have said other names. So are you going to answer those emails?
Some of these I already have answered. Some I just got today, and we will try to get back to them And
The only other question I had, if I hadn't told, but I guess everybody already know who this is.
Yeah.
I asked people, a lot of people don't know who he is. So that's why I decided to get a bigger picture and everything, because I want people to know, because I didn't know about C.T. Vivian till I saw him on Eye of the Prize and those things, but I didn't know that he was married in Peoria until I took this picture with him.
right, he does have some Peoria history, and I can't speak for Vice President Wilson, but I know he was in favor of CT also and stuff with it. He had already mentioned, that's the only reason to say that, he is in writing, put that out there, so.
CT has a daughter that lives here, and a lot of his grandchildren live here, are in District 150.
See, there's another fact we did that's good.
Yeah, JoJo Walker is her name, and that's his daughter. Looks just like him.
Okay.
And he's probably about 10, 20 grandchildren and great-grandchildren that live here.
And if there are no more other comments, I'm going to close this session at this point in time. But there are a couple of people I want to thank. Michelle, our IT person that gave up part of her Wednesday night, and of course our lovely board secretary who also had to give up Wednesday night to do this. And I really appreciate their time. And we were always in good hands with our security guards, so I wasn't worried about anything there. So thank you all for your participation. And like I said, we'll get this as a report back to the school board at the next school board meeting and repeat this out. That will be the next step, Mr. President, as I understand where we'll go from this. We'll do a report from the Building and Grounds Committee and get back to the board at the next one, and then make a decision as to where we go from here. Thanks, everybody, for contributing. I appreciate it.
Mr. Walker, you didn't share my email.